The Rural Electrification Administration. First of all, that would make an excellent band name. They could open up for the Old Crow Medicine Show or Gillian Welch. They'd have a stand-up bass and somebody would play washboard. And now, bearded hipsters and modern American costume drama soundtrack editors, it's the Rural Electrification Administration. Give it up. I would love that. The Rural Electrification Administration is not just an excellent Brooklyn band name, it is also a real thing. It was created by FDR in the spring of 1935 to quite literally turn the lights on all over America. Specifically, the mission was to get electricity to American farms, most of which had no electricity at the time and little hope of getting any ever. It simply cost too much to run the wires out to every far-flung family with a few acres. It cost too much for private industry to profit from doing it. And yet, the nation had an interest in it happening. And making it happen would make some jobs. So the government intervened, first in providing electricity to rural places, and later in providing phone service. When President Roosevelt acted in the 30s, we were in the middle of the Great Depression. The nation was flat broke, with breadlines and shantytowns and hobos on trains crisscrossing the country in a desperate search for work, for any work. And there, in our darkest hour, when times were as tough as they had ever been, the Rural Electrification Administration worked. In 1982, Mississippi Congressman Jamie L. Whitten, he was the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. He had grown up in our nation's poorest state in those tough times. Congressman Whitten asked for a record of the agency's accomplishments. The report to Congressman Whitten notes in the second paragraph that rural electrification was, quote, part of a general program of unemployment relief. The report also includes this chart showing the incredible climb our nation's loneliest places made, from very few people having lights or telephones to most people having them. This vertiginous graph shows our country basically from when we were China, right? Young and rapidly developing, with government investments making infrastructure possible. It's kind of amazing. We did not get to 90% of farms having phones until 1976 during the Carter administration. These days, we still invest in rural electrification, but on a smaller scale and with different types of technology and different goals. We do it through something called the Rural Energy for America program, REAP, part of the 2008 Farm Bill. This month, the federal government announced that it's giving out $27 million in rural energy loans and grants for farms and small-town businesses. Some of that's going to help farmers become more energy efficient or to make energy from unusual sources like something they like to call biomass that most people just call poop. But some of that funding is going to go to help farms and little shops make the switch, for example, to solar, like Pete's Cafe in Belen, New Mexico. They got a grant for solar. Or this Christmas tree farm in upstate New York, another grant for solar. This computer company in Mississippi made the list, too, with a $167,000 grant for solar energy. Another 500 grants are expected soon, again, under the Rural Energy for America program. The federal government is quietly investing in renewable energy and making energy more affordable and more renewable. It happens in ways you don't hear about much unless you read the local business pages, where federal money coming to town is a big deal, makes a big difference. To the extent that Washington's talking about alternative energy right now at all, that talk has to do with a failed government loan to a company called Solyndra, a maker of solar panels. In 2009, Solyndra got a loan for more than $500 million from the U.S. government. This month, the company closed its plant, laid off more than 1,000 people, and went bankrupt. Congress called its top executives to testify last week on Capitol Hill. The executives took the fifth. You can argue the Solyndra case any number of ways, whether President Bush was responsible for it since the loan started under him, or whether you want to blame President Obama, whether either administration should have known better to lend to Solyndra, or whether this was just a bad bet in one of those public-private partnerships that are never a sure thing, but that nevertheless elected officials are always saying we need more of. Solyndra made headlines last week in the latest round of funding for rural electrification. It's, of course, the dirty word of clean energy anymore. And this week, the Conservative Weekly, the Weekly Standard, put President Obama on its cover as President Solyndra. That's what they want to call him, trying to reduce his whole presidency to one loan to one failed maker of solar panels. But even as national conservatives want to make you feel bad about public investment in electricity, in energy, even some conservatives are pouring on the dollars for it in the states. The solar thing, in particular, makes sense to a lot of conservatives back home. Investing in infrastructure back home remains a core value, the same way it was a core value when the nation first started wiring our far-flung farms. Just this month, the Mississippi state legislature approved a $75 million loan to bring one maker of solar equipment to the state of Mississippi. Another solar company opened its doors in Mississippi this month with another $75 million in loans and tax breaks from the state. The Republicans of Mississippi are very proud of this. Very, very proud. Republican Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant reported from the ribbon cutting.
You're going to see new high-tech energy moving ahead, the green-type energy that we all believe will be part of the future. But don't worry, we're going to still drill for oil, we're going to still use CO2, we're going to still use coal in our clean coal gasification plant. Our energy policy is all of the above and more jobs for Mississippi.
Lieutenant Governor of Mississippi so excited about solar that he reassures Mississippians they will still use CO2, which is actually just the pollution part of energy. It's not the fuel. He is excited about solar. He is excited about jobs. He is excited, dare I say, about the greener, brighter future of Mississippi, made possible, if it comes to pass, by the collective will of the taxpayers to invest in it, facilitated by Republican politicians like him. There has not yet been a major Obama administration scandal, at least one that the Republicans like to harp on too much. They really want Solyndra to be a big Obama administration scandal. For that to work, however, the country sort of has to believe that investing in better electricity ideas is always a scam, and that it feels like one to the American people. With our history, I think that is a tough sell. Joining us now is E.J. Dionne, columnist for The Washington Post and senior fellow at the Brookings Institution and an MSNBC contributor. E.J., thanks for talking with us about this tonight.
Great to be with you.
So Republicans at the national level attacking investment in solar as if that's the sort of thing you ought to know is going to be corrupt from the beginning, as if that's something that government should never be used for. But then at the state level, we're actually seeing public coffers being used to bring solar in. Is there even a tension there, or do these things coexist totally independent of one another?
Well, I think the sun is clearly a socialist. That must be it. I think what you're seeing here is how governors are judged versus members of Congress. Governors are judged by results. Governors are judged by jobs created. Governors are judged by practical things on the ground. And Republican governors, like Democratic governors, know that we have a great history in our country of cooperation between private initiative and public enterprise. I mean, if you go all the way back to Hamilton, who wanted the federal government to encourage us to become a manufacturing nation, to Henry Clay, who had what he called the American system. Yes, the American system. It was about a whole lot of things to build the country, including building the canals and the roads that bound us together as a nation. So this notion that government never had anything to do with American economic growth is just untrue to our history. The American system, as Clay said, is about exactly these kind of partnerships, and Republican governors seem to know it, most of them.
How does that history translate to politics today, though? Do you think that there is, across the polity, is there a widely held American value of public investment to build up the country, or have we lost that sense of history to the point where it's now just a liberal thing, and people in the center and on the right don't share that anymore?
Well, I think our friends in the Tea Party have done a good job of, depending on your point of view, reinterpreting or rewriting the American story to turn us into an entirely individualistic, anti-government nation. And I think we progressives have defaulted by not sort of celebrating our own history and grabbing our own history and saying, no, this is not who we are. As Americans. Americans have always seen that cooperation and individual success go together. And so I think there is this concerted effort to rewrite the history books and do that in order to change our politics so we give up on these partnerships that actually made us a great country.
E.J., I wonder if we are... I think the way that I tend to think about what you were describing off the top about the difference between governors and members of Congress, people who are in executive authority and people participate in group decisions in legislatures, is sometimes the difference between politicking and actually governing. And when I read this quote tonight about the current almost shutting down the government standoff in Washington, it's from a Republican congressman named Charlie Dent. He said, quote, "I think it's ill-advised to bring the government to the brink of closure every 3 months. We have a fundamental basic responsibility to affirmatively govern the country. And the public loses confidence in everyone working here in Washington when we fail to meet our most basic responsibilities." Republican congressman challenging his own party, I think, on the latest almost shutdown of the government. Is there a little ray of governing sunshine in his frustration there?
Well, I think there is, although, it's remarkable that it's remarkable at all to quote a Republican saying our job is to govern when we're elected to govern. Yet it is quite something. But I think that the Republicans looked at the polls after the debt ceiling fight and said, well, we may be bringing down Obama pretty well because his numbers came down, but theirs went down even more, and that this was more aggressiveness and less governing than the Americans who elected them counted on. The people who voted them into office were not ideologues. The swing voters were just people who were upset about the state of the country, very unhappy about high unemployment. They didn't count on 3 shutdown threats in a year, and I think some of the Republicans know that.
E.J. Dionne, columnist for the Washington Post, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, an MSNBC contributor. E.J., I appreciate you talking to us about this. You are a wise, wise man, and it's always nice to talk to you about this stuff.
Thank you. I love shows that talk about rural electrification.
I know. We're just pandering for the ratings. You know us.